What could the Dallas Cowboys do in the draft that would give everyone a sense of optimism? Anything? Anything at all? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions, and boy, do you guys have a lot of questions that you want to answer. I can't imagine why. It's pretty crazy. But let's get to this first one from Chris. He wants to know, is there anything the Cowboys could do with the draft that would make us feel good about this team next season? I'm not seeing any scenarios with all the holes that we have on this team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I first of all, I'd like to just point out, Marcus, you did a great job of kind of picking one question that kind of, can represent a large swath of the questions that we're getting, right? Like, because I think that's kind of, we've got a lot of different questions asked a whole bunch of different ways, but I honestly think ultimately this is what they're asking, right? Like, why should we be looking forward to the 2024 season and all the different things like that? And what is there to be positive about? Look, I think you and I have been very clear throughout the years, and folks who have listened to the show for years, everydayers that have been listening to the show for multiple years, have heard us talk about the fact that the NFL season is just crazy unpredictable. And even when we talk about it, we still end up getting shockingly surprised by the way that things kind of end up playing out and the way that it actually shows out versus how we all anticipated, in August and in July when we're, kind of looking through depth charts and training camp videos and, OTAs and that sort of thing. So first off, there's that, right? There's just the oblong ball nature of it. We still have no idea what's going to happen. As much as there is like a lot of hand wringing about the Cowboys in general, and again, I'm not poo-pooing that. I think that there's lots of reason there. And as much as we've been kind of dismissing that, the Cowboys will still be a very competitive team next year. Like I don't think that that's even with the. I just believe that they're going to have Dak Prescott. They're going to have CeeDee Lamb. They're going to have Micah Parsons on this team.
Our friends at FanDuel believe they are as well. The Cowboys win total set at 10.5, which there's only like 3 or 4 teams in the NFL. Actually, I think there's only 2 teams in the NFL that have higher win totals than Dallas. So even the sports books believe that Cowboys are still going to be a good team.
And I will point out that that's actually a game higher than it was last season. If
full game higher, yes.
Yeah, they picked them to win 9 games last year. So so let's just keep all that in mind, right? Like the aspects about this team that made it good last year are all, still in place, really, right? So now, but the problem is that our goals are further than where we've been going, right? Like it's not enough. Like it's going to be incredibly disappointing if this team gets to the playoffs and loses in a very similar manner, right? Like so I think there's 2 things here. I think there is a real opportunity with a good or just an average draft class this year for the Cowboys to get back into the playoffs with an opportunity to make fools of themselves again or potentially break that curse, right? The question becomes like, can they get past that barrier? And that's where I think it's tough, right? Because it just feels like the Cowboys could probably scrape together the resources they need to get to something similar to where they were last season as far as like roster building, that sort of thing. But I have a hard time believing that they're going to be better. And I certainly have a hard time believing that they're going to be in a better situation in the playoffs than they were last year. Last year, they had the second seed. They had a home game. They were completely healthy. They played a team that they felt like they should have beat, and they got boat ran. So I think that's where, for me personally, a lot of the pessimism comes is, can this team advance? But whether or not this will be a good team next year, I don't really have so many questions about that, because there are these really good players that have been in the scheme who have won 12 games 3 years in a row, that I feel like, they're going to at least be able to assemble a 10-win season, without too much disaster striking.
So let's look at it like this, because the question from Chris was like, is there anything that the Cowboys could do in the draft that would get everybody excited again? So I want to go through some like picks, and just you tell me how you think the general Cowboy fan would feel. So
Okay.
if the Cowboys draft Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma left or right tackle, how do you think the Cowboy fans would feel about that one?
I mean, I think that they would view it as pretty chalk, right? And like, oh, the Cowboys are. I think the general Cowboy fan would view it as, oh, they lost a left tackle. Oh, they
Like
drafted
it's
a
drafting
guy.
for need, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So to me, what's funny is I think there's a chance that pick could work out, but I actually think that would be one that I think would depress Cowboy fans a little more. Like, oh, we're replacing Tyron Smith with Tyler Guyton. Like, that doesn't move the needle. How are we better?
I again point to the Micah Parsons selection and how
I know.
incredibly unpopular that was, and how, again, like, and then not that anyone was wrong to be upset about that pick, but I guess to more point out how far off we can all be, right?
Sure.
Like not only were we not aware that Micah Parsons was that, or that what he has become, we weren't aware that there was a Micah Parsons in the draft.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So like, I think that's the point, is that we have this idea of all these players and what they can become, but we don't have any idea of all these players and what they become. We have, we have an inkling, we have insight, we can project, but
we're just talking about like
even project, which is something that happens.
We're just talking about like, how is the general feel of this Cowboys team in May? Because I think after last year's draft, because they reached on several picks, including Mozzie a little bit, the Schoonmaker pick, like I think people felt like, oh, they were drafting for need a little bit. But if they drafted, let's say, a center, Jackson Powers Johnson or Graham Barton, I actually think most Cowboy fans would get behind that, because I think Cowboy fans would look at it like, hey, that solves a need for us right now. But it's also a good long-term thing, regardless of what happens with Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott. Like, building your trenches and getting a really good center is both a good short-term and long-term move. So I actually think that is a move that I think Cowboy fans would be very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking for, hey, how can they draft to get to be a better team than they were last season? If that's the question, essentially, then I can tell you, what if they drafted 2 offensive linemen who both hit, right? And suddenly you've raised the floor even a little bit, right? Even replacing Tyron Smith, I think at times, like, Tyron Smith was incredible as a pass protector, but has taken a step off as a run blocker. And Biotish, I think struggled at times to kind of move folks off the ball. And that, if you could somehow elevate your run game while hopefully not losing too much on your pass protection, or being able to counteract that with just different pass blocking schemes, there's a chance you could elevate this offense a little bit just by making it a better, more balanced offense.
I want to get to that in the next segment, because that's actually our next question. What's the best offensive line pairing the Cowboys could do in round 1 and round 2? Just a couple other ones. I think if like a Brian Thomas fell to them at 24, I've got a little bit mixed feelings about how he would fit the Cowboys offense, but I do think that would get people really excited. Like, hey, this is a receiver who most people have as a top 12, top 13 player in the draft. The Cowboys drafted him at 24. It's not the biggest need, but they just drafted the best player available. I do think that would raise the optimism here quite a bit.
Yeah, I just think that it's going to have to be some kind of offensive player, because I just don't know that there's a defensive player, especially that the Cowboys are going to be picking at 24, that's going to move the fan needle that much. And on top of that, this is such an offensive heavy draft, right? That, like,
did you see Mike McCarthy's comments about drafting offense and defensive players? They asked him about the strategy draft. He said, well, we could, if the draft fell out this way, we could draft 3 defensive guys in a row. I hope not. I hope that doesn't happen, but it could happen.
Yeah,
Which is basically telling you it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So, he's like, no, that's scheduled to happen next year.
Yeah, when I'm gone.
Once Zimmer's had his year, I mean, they do this like clockwork, right? Like you get 1 year of being a coordinator, then you get your draft. But I think there's lots of ways that the Cowboys could draft that I feel like optimism would be increased. Yeah. Honestly, I think optimism will increase regardless after the draft, just because it changes the narratives and suddenly the Cowboys are accumulating talent. So
we'll let Dion and his staff worry about the defense in 2025. We did get a question about how do we like Shedeur Sanders as a quarterback prospect, which I thought was kind of funny. We'll get to him next offseason, I'm sure. All right, later. Let's talk about what is the best offensive line pairing the Cowboys could do in round 1 and round 2. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront so you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We wanted to let you know about Locked On Sports Today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down that volume because of all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, this next question comes from Tom Sully. He wants to know, would you be willing to go offensive line in rounds 1 and 2? And what combination would you sign up for?
Yes. I mean, I think it's reasonable, right? You have pretty strong, obvious, maybe the strongest obvious needs at 2 different positions on the offensive line. And I think on top of that, I'm obviously a huge believer in investing in the offensive and defensive lines early in the draft. I feel like it's just a smart way to invest these picks. You're dealing with guys that are planet players, right? Just a kind of aspect of physical skill and size. So yes, I have no problem going offensive line back to back. Especially again in this class where there's so much talent at the top, and I mean you can think of tons of different pairings that you could enjoy, right? Mims and Zach Frazier,
which would be really funny together. 300 pound left tackle and a small center.
Yeah, we're building a large to small as we move inward, right?
I almost think it has to be tackle first, right? Or a guy that can project as a tackle, because I don't know if when you get to round 2 if you're going to like your tackle options.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's interesting. JC Latham is a guy that is had kind of a rough run of stuff. He didn't do any of his testing at Alabama. There's whispers that he may not be athletic enough to play left tackle. So the question becomes, do some of these guys start pushing down, which then pushes down other guys? So maybe there's a possibility that you could get one of these offensive tackles that you think are the bottom end of that run. Maybe you could have them fall a little bit, or you could trade up maybe a little bit
Fatanu,
to get a guy. Yeah, like Fatanu, or I mean, really, what if Guyton isn't loved the way that we think he is in league circles, right? There's a possibility that he could fall into the middle of the second round and you potentially go up and get him. Yes, I would agree though. I think the issue I have is that I want to take a center first because I like the centers that I'm going to be able to take at 24.
Well, see, You like
But the problem,
JPJ,
the
and I like
sequencing probably argues against me, right?
yeah.
Like,
You like JPJ. I like JPJ, by the way, too. But I'm
yeah.
more of a Graham Barton fan. Uh, those guys just aren't falling past. Well, I can't say for sure on JPJ, but like Barton's just not falling past like pick 27, pick 28. Like there's too many teams
Oh yeah,
that,
no, no,
that
no.
need that kind of offensive lineman. So if you take Barton at 24, what are you hoping to get at 56? Are you hoping to get Patrick Paul? Or maybe you
Yeah,
overdraft a Blake Fisher from Notre
from Notre
Dame?
Dame. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why the names they're just less names, right? Like less viable names that you'd love at 56 at tackle than there would be at center. I feel like you could get to center and still have a list of the Georgia kid, the Arkansas kid. I'm sorry, I'm not using their
Yeah,
names, but
Cedric Van Pan, Bo
yeah,
Lemer, right?
Bo Lemer. Obviously we talked about uh, Bordellini and the Wisconsin kid. He's maybe even a little bit later, right? That you could probably
Mhm.
get maybe
Yeah.
third round, right? So I think there are more names at center as you get along because the center class stretches, and center is also just generally a position
Well,
that you can draft a starter in the third or fourth
can,
round,
can
right?
I ask you a question? Because this is what I'm struggling with a little bit. What's the identity of this Cowboys offensive line moving forward? Like, are they a gap team? Are they a zone team?
I
Do
think
they
that's
want to
the
be athletic? Do they want to be big and strong and try to maul you? Like, that's what I'm having a hard time figuring out when I'm watching these offensive linemen.
Well, I think I had a hard time figuring it out watching our offensive line last year, right? Like, I tend to think, look, the general consensus about the history of the offensive line coach would point that we're trying to be more of a wide zone team, right? That we're trying to get back into more of a wide zone, but
They just
we
didn't
ran,
do it at all last year.
but I know that's the thing is they ran a lot of gap and it was like a lot of man stuff. So, I tend to think
Because
that. Go
because you
ahead.
could talk me into like if that's the idea, like, hey, we're getting back to being a wide zone offense where we're going to be able to move and we're going to run. Like, you could talk me into, hey, we're taking Jordan Morgan and we're sticking him at left tackle, and then we're taking Tanner Bortolini in round 3. Maybe we take Zach Frazier if he falls to us in round
Yeah.
2, and
Yeah.
we're going to be on the move. This is the old, the Green Bay Packers that Mike McCarthy had when it was it Brian Balaga and David Bakhtiari, like 2 sub 300-pound offensive tackles. Like, I could at least understand that, but I've got no feel at all as what the game plan is here.
Well, I wonder if the thing is that maybe Tyron Smith's leaving provides you even more of an opportunity to be more flexible here,
It's
or not
probably
more
true.
flexible. To an opportunity to change if you want to and lean more into the change, right? So I think it's it is interesting that we kind of got the feel that it would be more zone, but it didn't turn out that way necessarily. So I tend to think that they may be looking at some more bigger body offensive linemen, maybe just because based on
So
what we
weird.
saw, which is so weird. But at the same time, it's not that weird when you talk about the cyclical nature of the NFL, and like there is more return to gap and power schemes to kind of counteract lighter boxes. It's easier to run with lighter boxes and take advantage of lighter
Yeah.
box defenses while you're running those schemes. So, that's why I think I've been kind of leaving this all wide open, is because I
Same.
really do believe that the Cowboys could go either way. And maybe what they do is they draft the best player and then let the player's skill sets decide kind of which way they lean. And I think that that's not the stupidest way to do it either, because let's say you get in the second round and Cooper Beebe's there and you've got a choice between Cooper Beebe and let's say, some other kind of lighter type guy, but you don't like as much. I wouldn't reach past a Cooper Beebe because
No.
I didn't feel like he could play my only zone blocking scheme system. I would take the best player and try to find a way to use him in a way that fits with everybody else. Because I do feel like the rest of the guys on your offensive line can be versatile enough to adjust to that.
Yeah, so you just kind of stole my thunder there. Cooper Beebe
Ah,
was the guy that I want to pair with a first-round offensive lineman. Like, you just tell me what it is, because you draft Cooper Beebe, he can play guard, he can play center. You draft, let's say you draft Tyler Guyton in round 1. Not my favorite first-round pick, but now you've got Tyler Guyton at left tackle, and now you can play Cooper Beebe at center, right? Or if you want to draft more of, maybe you draft JPJ and Cooper Beebe, and now we're moving guys with Tyler Smith at left tackle. Like,
Yeah.
now we're moving guys off the ball.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
really exciting. But I think like the guys for me in round 2 that are the most interesting would be Cooper Beebe and Zach Frazier. I just have my doubts that Frazier falls that far to them in round 2.
Yeah, and to kind of add to your point a little bit, if you're doing the double dip situation, I kind of agree that you need to be able to keep your options open with Tyler Smith, because the guy you may want to draft, the guy that may be the best offensive lineman available when you pick, he might be a guard. You may want to keep that spot open just in case you are trying to assemble a best 5.
All right, let's answer one more question from a longtime listener, Goran, about which positions should the Cowboys draft early or not at all. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament, whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even go bet on who you think is going to win the entire tournament. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers on Friday's show, it's going to be our second mock draft simulation of the year. We've got a special little surprise for that mock, so make sure you guys tune into it. I know you guys love the first one we did. Not a lot of people love the running back that we chose in round 2. Well, I know. Well, people were very, very hard. I found out that people do not like Jonathan Brooks. That I know that's a common pick. Cowboy fans are not that thrilled about Jonathan Brooks.
Do you think it's because they're reflexively angry that the Cowboys mentioned that they may have some slight interest in him because of the Cooper? I think it's because
100%.
The Cooper news is why they're mad at Brooks, right? Like,
yes.
I'm not alone in thinking that, right?
Yes, I think if we knew nothing else about Jonathan Brooks, the Cowboys didn't do his surgery, I think people would be all excited. But we've heard this a couple times.
Agree, because he's a good looking running back. I will tell you that. Yeah.
All right. Last question here from Goran. He wants to know, what is the one position in the draft where you feel like it's either you take one early or you don't waste time taking one at all?
Punter. No. I'm assuming he's talking about in the context of this draft and with our team, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So, we talked about a couple of those, right? Like, it's positions where you need to and honestly I think offensive line is one of them, right?
Like I think tackles the one for me, because like you have guys you want to develop in Austin Richards and Matt Waletzko and stuff. Like I don't need another day 3 developmental offensive lineman.
Yeah, it's not a numbers game with tackle. Like
no.
You're looking to add talent at the top. That's why you're drafting in the first round. So I do think there is a point where if you can't get a tackle in the first 2 rounds, then you start looking at the Tyler Smith situation and say, okay, let's maybe pencil him in at tackle. We know we can probably get a starting guard here in the 3rd or 4th round. I mean, that's just how deep this interior offensive line class goes. So I think, tackle specifically is a spot that comes to mind. I would say corner, maybe. Well, corners. No, because you may want to add a corner later, but so maybe that's a bad one. Linebacker is another linebacker, because I think like numbers is not as much of a thing. You have numbers, but like you want to add talent to the top. So
I'm going to also say safety, which safety is kind of a nothing or nothing position for me. Like I don't understand. There's a section of Cowboy fans that wanted the Cowboys to draft a safety in the top 100. And I just don't get it, because you've already paid Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson. And Wanya Thomas showed you a lot as a rookie or as a second-year player. Marquise Bell played well as a linebacker. You still have Izzy Mukamu. Like, I don't know. I just don't think you need another body there.
Yeah, the resources don't make sense there.
No.
Look, I think some of these spots we're talking about, they actually do end up getting drafted because, you're churning special teams, bottom of the roster folks. But as far as like, move the needle picks, like, tackle is a priority early, but is like only a priority early. And I think that's what Doran's asking is like, what are the spots that Goran, I'm sorry, I said Doran. What are the spots that, you're targeting for target rich top of your depth chart spots, not necessarily drafting for depth. And to me, you've got, Richards, you've got Let's you've got, some interior guys who also can kick out. So you've got tackles. And then on top of that, Tyler Smith, right? So you have numbers there. It's about finding a starter at the position. And if you can find a starter, then draft him. If you can't, then don't just go reach for a guy another developmental tackle. You've already got like 2 or 3 of those guys, really, one of whom is now playing guard.
I got one. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. Receiver is the one for me. Like, if they're not, if they don't draft a receiver, I'm saying top 100 because I think that's a little different. This class is really good. But like, if you draft one in the 4th to the 6th round, I just don't get it, because obviously you have CD, you've got Brandon Cooks on a 1-year deal, you've got Jalen Tolbert, who I think they're hoping to be the 3rd receiver. Then we had another question about Jalen Brooks that we didn't get to, is that if we're buying kind of the Jalen Brooks hype that they're selling, and I kind of am.
I am. I mean, just based on what we saw from him last year.
Well, and we should mention Kevontae Turpin's role even got more defined now that the new kickoff rule. So like he's locked in to be one of your top 5 receivers. They really don't need like a wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. If you're going to draft a receiver, like draft it so this guy can be like an instant an instant wide receiver 2, and you kind of kick everybody else down. But just adding another wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Which is also my thought process with corner, right? Like the only thing is that corners, you can draft them to first of all, you can never have enough corners. Second of all, you may draft them with special teams value, but in reality, like you already have kind of numbers at the position if you need them. And so like drafting a guy in the middle round when you probably could pick up a running back or another spot, it won't make as much sense as someone who could potentially move the needle up top. Now, that's why I'm still an advocate for if the if any of these top corners fell to you at 24, I think the Cowboys should at least consider it, right? Just because of what their situation is. They've got Bland, who's on he's got I think 1 more year, and then you're gonna have to figure out what
2 years left, but 1 year before you probably have to pay him.
Yeah. So, and then, you have a 3rd corner in Jordan Lewis, but he's a veteran guy. There's a chance that falls off. You want depth there. So I think that's another spot where if the right situation fell, corner could be a pick, but I don't know that like I'm feeling like I have to come out of the draft with a corner.
No. I think you grab a guy on day 3 that you like, that you think fits Mike Zimmer's defense. And listen, if you want to draft a guy like 3rd round that you feel like can come in and maybe be a future slot option for you, and because they don't really have another slot corner beyond Jordan Lewis, like I can at least understand that. But like a 1st round corner is where it gets a little weird. Like, where is a 1st round corner playing on this team right away?
I mean, I think you kick Bland inside, but and if you get the right guy, like I think you shouldn't turn it down. But
it has to be to me, it has to be like Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell.
That's I'm talking like if one of the top 3 guys, like even Kool-Aid McQuiston fell to you at the 24. If the board is a certain way, you may want to consider it, right?
He's going to fall to you.
We'll see.
I think there's a good chance he might fall to you in the 2nd round, but that's for a different show. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Again, tune into tomorrow's show. We're going to be doing a mock draft simulator. Maybe Kool-Aid will fall to us, and
maybe he will.
To do a debate. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you right back here tomorrow.